We got one man shooting another.
Yeah, I wasn't sure actually.
Was that interesting or not? I just gave the special signal and that just came from the northwest. Amazing, huh?
It is amazing.
I love it, I love it. It's good having you here too, crazy man.
Yes, it's great to be here. Jesus, I suppose eventually we'll all communicate.
So, Colm saw that. We had the appearance of that. Oh, he's going to start up aiming this thing at me again. But I've got the night scope. You can't see me, but I can see you very clearly. When reality is really a mental construct.
Are they the two little red lights at the bottom?
Yeah, the infrared. That's right. Isn't that lovely?
That's very good.
Yeah.
I must get one of those. Can we do another signal?
Sure. When I feel the right. We are recording a documentary film camera work made by Colm Stapleton here. And he's got his bonjour, yeah, le tout ensemble.
J'étais en France et j'ai fait l'interview avec ce monsieur autour de ses expériences en faire un livre autour des UFO qui...
Yeah, mais oui. Okay, and we got his laptop here too. Look at this. He's got all the soundbite little cue cards on there. Fantastic, and we're all hooked up with cameras here. Ashtrays, we need those. We don't have any Mary Jane hanging around, but we're doing this, folks, in the office here as we spin around. And he brought his daughter with him this time, and his daughter's name is? Fenevere, and she's absolutely adorable. Very smart, bright child, she really is. So we're very happy to have these two here. See you down the road.
I like the royal we.
For tax and upkeep purposes now.
They can't just layer it around.
The gentry have to give way. We got Colm here now in front of the alien blueprint plaster cast in the desert in California when the alien stepped out of the scout ship. This is the mark he left. The same, as we've said many times, symbols found on rocks by Professor Hammett in South America, dated to be 10 to 30,000 years old. So we'll let Colm take his shots now, and I'll help him line it up the way he wants. 1951, these prints were laid down.
Where were they laid down?
In the Californian desert.
Good looking at all.
Colm, and now you can get back to another facet of your reality, you know.
Which facet is that?
And be a little self-indulgent and have a little privacy. And of course, if you use the word privacy over here, they look at you because they say, "Isn't it privacy?" And I said, "You don't say you're a private person, do you?"
No, you don't. No.
I really started it all. This was the time in the 40s when they were just beginning to be seen. And I realized that what we were seeing now was what had been here thousands of years ago. Because I said, well, these seem to be the same things. That glowed in the dark and were wound and could go to other planets. So I went to the British Museum and got out the Mahabharata, the great Indian Vedic Bible, and it was just packed with flying saucers. This was the time in the 40s when they were just beginning to be seen. And I realized that what we were seeing now was what had been here thousands of years ago.
Why the 40s?
Because the war was just over. I read this book on Atlantis, and it got me interested. Because I said, well, these seem to be the same things that are being reported in the sky. So I did my book, which was all historical and factual, going way back, and also in Ireland and everywhere. And it was turned down by every publisher in England, who said absolute rubbish, and which was very fortunate, because it gave me a year waiting when somebody wrote and said there's been a landing, and that's what we were waiting for, George Adamski. So I wrote to him and said, I hear you've had a landing. And he wrote back saying, would you like my photographs? And he sent a beautiful set of pictures, which are now famous. I mean, you could show them if you like.
What did they show?
Of the UFO. Well, we'll show them later if you like, and photograph them. And at the same time, I found a publisher who was interested. And he said, well, George Adamski is either honest or mad, because he's offered you these priceless pictures for free. He must be on the level. So I was very excited by them, particularly the fact that it didn't look like a flying saucer, that particular one. And then he had ones of the big motherships, saucers coming out of them.
Can you just say what it did look like? I know we'll see them later, but just so we can have it all.
Well, it looked rather like a bell with windows round the top, a sort of turret with groups of 4 windows round it, which I think retracts. I'm not sure, I think it does. And the motherships, he got incredible good photos. You see, he was an amateur astronomer, and he had a beautiful 6-inch telescope on Mount Palomar, which I've used, and he managed to get them when they were stationary. So, of course, putting the 2 books together just created a bomb. I mean, it was explosive, the effect.
What was the effect? It
was like the second coming. I mean, every single paper in England had it on the front page with the photos, because they all they offered us incredible sums for the photos. And my publisher was very wise. He said, no, we'll give them to you for free. So they all used them, gave us this tremendous publicity, and it was an overnight sensation. And I went into a club I belonged to. 2 or 3 people cheered. A nuclear scientist came up and assaulted me, said, how dare you write such rubbish? So I said, well, look, if it's rubbish, why do you get so excited? Well, then one thing went to another, and the royal family got interested, and they still are. And Lord Mountbatten actually had a landing at his place, Broadlands, which I've written about in Flying Saucer Review.
How did he? What did he make of it, Lord Mountbatten?
Well, he had to be careful what he wrote, but he had a wonderful collection of photographs, which he showed contactees.
Is this at Rumsey?
Rumsey, yes, at Rumsey. So, you know, I remember the night before publication, my publisher, Waveney Gurdon, said, Desmond, tomorrow night we'll either be famous or be in jail for disturbing the peace. Well, both. Well, then, of course, there were endless copies, and a chap called Danikin, later von Danikin, plagiarized half my book. And I called one chapter Chariots of the Gods. Well, I didn't mind as long as he was adding genuine new stuff, you see. But then when he started inventing stuff, it was so easy to slap him down and discredit it. But my role really was the showing that they've always been around. They probably invented us by crossbreeding, as it says in Genesis. The Elohim came down and made man in their image and likeness. And I've heard extraordinary things since, how there have been so many interventions. And these present abductions, and it seems to be as if they're doing a new one.
A new crossbreed?
A new crossbreed.
Why would they want to do that?
I don't know. Why should anyone want to do anything? But just like this world, it's a big world, and you've got anything on it from baddies to saints. So the universe got very high beings and also some rather nasty ones who you want to steer clear of if you ever meet them.
Now, I know we went through this yesterday, but not on camera, which is the point to do with the cover-up. Which I asked the question: how can successive governments, different personnel, people dying, people coming on the scene, cover up this? And you said no, it isn't covered up.
Well, it's been uncovered by Colonel Philip Corso in his book The Day After Roswell. Which is a top bestseller, and it's not had a single mention in the press. You can see how strong the power of censorship is. Still, it's a top bestseller, and I became good friends with him, and he wanted to write a second book with me, because there was a lot more to it than that.
Than just Roswell.
And his job was in the Pentagon. They had all these bits and pieces they pulled out of Roswell, like microcircuitry, fiber optics, Kevlar armor, light optic glass, just like Adamski described. And the control board, as Adamski said, was like a typewriter with a screen. 952, just like a portable computer. And nearly all, look, this thing, this watch of mine,
Can you do that again?
the technique of this little microcircuitry, that all came from Roswell. This sudden jump. And I remember, because we heard about Roswell, and what puzzled them was that there were no controls they could understand, and the radio had no valves. Well, Philip Corso's job, he had an office in the Pentagon called Office of Foreign Technology. And very clever, because nobody knew what it really was. But when somebody like IBM was trying to work on a solid state, you know, he'd call them and say, have you ever seen a thing like this? They said, Jesus, that's 20 years ahead of anything we're doing. Where'd you get it? Foreign technology. So they never let on. And then, of course, he had a laser. He said he was playing with it. And all the paper on his wall caught fire. You suddenly saw this little fine red beam of light. And then the control systems, which would like, it was another control system, handprints on a board, and each finger just a slight pressure with controls. And now George Adamski drew that for my children in 1968 when he came and told them how they could work it. And then he said there's another system worked from the gland here, you know, the psychic gland, for instant control. But please don't repeat it. They don't want it known. Well, now Corso showed me photos of these headbands which they'd wear, and you merely have to think for the thing to respond. So it cuts out any time lag. And I said, did you try them on American pilots? And he laughed. He said, yeah, we blew their brains out. We're not up. So thank God we haven't yet managed to fly them. America's got, there's about 11 crashed or in captivity. And I've seen films taken from Area 51 smuggled out, and they're sort of, you know, they aren't able to control them.
So they make attempts to fly them, but they don't.
Yes, because I asked Adamski, I said, well, they've got this wonderful thing, 1954, why don't they let us...
Just when you move your arm there, you hit the...
Oh, sorry.
That's okay, yeah.
Right, well, I asked Adamski back in 1954, they've got this free energy, and they can seem to go wherever they like. Why don't they let us have it? And he said, because they gave us a flying saucer, we'd only put a nuclear bomb in it, try and drop it on someone. And again, he said, another reason is, if we had free energy, it would be the end of the oil companies, the airlines, the railroads, the power companies. It would destroy our economy. And the UFO people seem quite wise. They don't want to be responsible, because it would destroy our planet. And he compared it to missionaries barging into some remote jungle and telling them they're giving them entirely new thoughts and making them wear trousers. The tribes have just died of sadness. They've destroyed all their old beliefs. So he said it's got to be done gradually. And it is, because in the last 50 years, they're seen more and more and more. More people have seen them. And gradually the idea of when there is a big landing, people will just say, oh good, at last. Particularly the children who've been brought up on it. You know, they'll be absolutely prepared. And so they'll probably say, where have you been all this time?
But is there a consecutive nature to it? Like, if Fatima is the thing I did a thing on before, if their idea is to infiltrate history in a certain way, they did do it there, but I often feel they didn't follow it up very well.
Oh, well, I not really agree with every civilization I've studied has its UFOs and its gods who came down in beams of light and flying chariots. Look at the Bible, fiery chariots. We must show that picture, you know, the fiery, Ezekiel's fiery chariot taken by a Mexican. And they've always been guided or helped by these. Sometimes they're called angels, sometimes they're called gods. And the book of, sorry, it'll come in a minute, one of the Old Testament books has marvelous accounts of it. Well, there's Ezekiel and his flying wheel, and then there's some, the name will come in a minute.
What about the Irish?
Oh yes, of course, the Tuatha De Danann were a space race, because they came from the sky and they went back into it, having clobbered the nasty King Balor. You know where the word baleful comes from? Baleful eye. Balor's eye, which was a huge ruby, as far as I can see. It was a very powerful laser. And it was finally overcome at the Battle of Mortuag, and it fell in its face and dug Loch Swilly. That's the legend, and it's probably true.
Can you just say that again? Actually, it was. I think it was Loch Nassoul.
What?
Loch Nassoul.
Nassoul.
Not Nassoul.
Oh, it's Loch Nassoul, right.
Nassoul.
Where is that?
It's
not
right.
Loch.
It's about a mile from where I live, actually.
Oh, it's meant to be very deep.
It's very deep, yeah.
Oh, I thought it was Loch Swilly.
You were thinking of Derry's Swilly.
Yes, because that isn't deep.
It is deep, yeah. I wonder why the
No,
name...
Loch Swilly isn't. It's a tidal. But Loch Nassoul, where do you live?
Sligo.
Oh, that's
Because
where...
Moitura is right above it, and then the
Yeah.
was
Oh, well,
thrown.
of course. Now it makes sense, yes. Right, we'll go back on
Okay,
that.
just to say, the eye was chucked out, and what happened?
Yes. Well, Balor's eye was finally knocked over at the Battle of Moitura and dug out the deepest lake in Ireland, Loch Nassoul. Loch Nassoul, thank you. And another place where it struck was on that island off the north coast of Donegal.
Tory?
Torry.
Yeah.
And you know, all the cliffs, big cliffs, are facing the Atlantic.
Can you just say all the big cliffs of Tory? Just...
All the big cliffs in Ireland and England are facing the Atlantic. That way they're facing the other way, they're facing east. I could say that, that's interesting.
Yes.
Every time there's been something of interest or danger, they visited this planet and interfered many times. Because it's a very interesting planet. It seems to be almost an experimental greenhouse. I mean, because it's unique with its large moon, without which it wouldn't have tides and atmosphere, and being exactly right placed. A lot of scientists think it was geoengineered. Well, it's possible. It could be done. Anyway, the technology you read in the Irish mythology is extraordinary. Look at Cuchulainn. He had rockets. He had flaming darts, which flew with a hissing sound, and they could find you even in a cave. Now that's really high-tech homing. What about the thunder feet of 1,000, which could destroy 1,000? And you read, it's just as if a native, simple native, had seen some of our armaments. Like the Brahma weapon in the Vedas, 4,000 years ago it was written. It had a flash, the light of 1,000 suns, and produced great poisonous clouds and destroyed the armies. And when the clouds had gone, the army was only a shadow on the ground. Well, look at some of the Hiroshima pictures, and that is what worried them. And they've told Adamski that if we send any atomic device into space, they'll destroy it. And it happened. And I got this out of Colonel Corso. He said, you know, all these missions we've been sending out had a tiny atomic engine about this size, no bigger than your fists, and they get to Mars, they'll disappear. I said, I could have told you that. They're not going to allow them. They won't allow them. They didn't mind one that went out to space, you know, photographed all the planets, so, but they don't want any pollution. And it was attracted to it. What attracted also, why it was shot down, it wasn't shot down, there's a very heavy concentration of radar around Area 51. And it was that upset their control system, in which they do use now, the high-powered thing, to try and shoot them down. And I've seen a film taken from an American satellite of a thunderstorm on Earth. It's amazing to see all these flashes. And then the UFOs measuring the lightning. And then up comes a red bolt of light, and they can just dodge it. Someone's taking a pot shot at them, which is silly.
Okay, I'm going to say, like the forces who are coming in.
Well, back in 1953, George Adamski, who met a very highly evolved group, who for some reason called themselves Venusians, and probably it's a code name because we weren't ready yet to accept, you know, instant travel, spinning through long distances. He said there are other groups here who are not so nice and not so friendly, who don't have our well-being at heart, and who look upon us rather like laboratory animals. Well, now at the San Marino conference, at my table, there were 4 people who'd been beamed up into UFOs. Some had had a good experience, some had had an unpleasant one.
And were the abductions all like from similar craft under similar circumstances?
No, they were just suddenly whoosh, drawn up in a sort of tube of light, like I think you said that the Dedan were mentioned. Now, when I started reading Irish mythology, I thought, my God, it's all happened in Ireland too. And you reread it in a different light. There it is.
And what has kept us in ignorance for so long?
Well, I think bad timing, because 1947, remember the war had only just ended. The Americans still remembered Orson Welles' famous broadcast, War of the Worlds, which people took seriously, and there was a sort of panic all over America. And also Stalin and America had their fingers on the button. You know, it's a moment of great, when either side could have just gone over the top. And I think, quite rightly, they said, well, we've got to keep this quiet, because if it gets out that we've been invaded by space people, and if the Russians hear we have a flying saucer, God knows what will happen. Now, General Westmoreland wanted to tell, but General Vandenberg, well, ordered the report to be burned. It's all in the day after Roswell. And I don't think they had any choice. It's such a pity they chose that moment. So, as you know, you've seen the film Roswell. It's pretty well as it happened. Once you've started a lie, you've got to keep it up. You know, so they're sort of hoist on their own petard now. And I think they're frantically trying to find a way out.
And is it just America, Russia? Is there smaller fry in this?
No, I mean, at the last conference at San Marino, there was a dear little Chinaman who was actually a cabinet minister of the government. He was delightful. And he said, in China, we have the biggest UFO magazine in the world, circulation of 500,000. And I said, I thought you didn't allow this. He said, oh we're fascinated, because they fly along the dragon paths, which we call the ley lines. And he said, they're in our mythology. We're very interested. It's only America, really, who's so paranoid. In Mexico, that's why they're all appearing in Mexico now. And during the last eclipse of the sun, when they knew everyone would be out in the street with a camcorder, they put on a wonderful show. And you can see them pointing, look, you know, and you see, it's very, very effective there. And some of them are sort of doing that boat-like motion, going behind buildings. There was an amazing library of films being built up now.
And does it all add up? I mean, I just take the incident recently of the French military admitting something's going on, but that information does not permeate.
Well,
it could be a little article in Nice Matin or whatever.
Well, you see, the press evidently, I don't know who controls the press, but Corso's book, which was a bestseller, didn't get a line. Somebody just said, don't.
Would you imagine that the Irish government is aware of this stuff?
Well, they may have a note or two in their brown envelopes. I don't know. I think they've heard about it. I don't think it concerns them very much. Some may be very interested. When it first started, the British government was very interested. I was asked to see all the cabinet ministers and defense people who took it very seriously, and they said, do anything more, please tell us, because we want to know. And George, I've got all their letters still, and George Ward, who was Secretary for Air, used to address me as the Sorcerer Royal. And he wrote, I remember saying, let's find out how to build a flying saucer. Have you any ideas? Because we actually did arrange, and with George Adamski, that if they wanted to land in the forecourt of Buckingham Palace, you know, at the changing of the guard, the Queen would receive them on the balcony, because the royal family are very, very heavily involved. But the UFO people obviously didn't think the time was yet ripe, and I don't think it is. It's getting nearer. And
do you mean all the royal family are involved, or just certain parts?
Well, certainly Mountbatten and Prince Philip. And Flying Saucer Review, our magazine, they've had complimentary copies since it started. And another, Prince Philip's aide, Air Marshal Horsley, he was a wing commander when I first saw him. He wrote a book because he had some extraordinary contacts with a strange UFO man.
When was that?
Oh, about 10 years ago. No, because he was an air marshal by that time. And a number of top-ranking generals and airmen have come out saying, why do we keep this secret? The most vociferous among them was Air Chief Marshal Dowding. you know.
Is part of the notion of secrecy because they themselves haven't a clue what it is? Okay, they might have radared this, they've seen this
Well,
light
you
and
see,
they can't.
it also makes our Air Force obsolete. The one I saw down on Nice Beach, the old plane coming into land, and a beautiful little UFO was like a figure skater dancing around it. I couldn't believe my eyes. And it was black against the sky, so it was no trick of the light. And it was an old, it had 3 tails and piston engines. It was probably doing a survey of ancient aircraft. Some kid doing his A-levels or something, a paper on old aircraft. Anyway, it's unmistakable.
But I would imagine, since they haven't intruded, they've never attacked any plane or they've never embroiled us in any battles.
Quite right. Planes have crashed because they've flown too near or got... There was the famous case, Captain, not Mantell, yes, who was sent up in a Mustang to investigate a very large UFO. And I also got the story from an eyewitness. It was huge. And he went up and he said, my God, it's about the size of the Eiffel Tower. And it kept trying to evade him, but eventually got near and his plane just disintegrated. And Adamski told me that. He said, you see, they're all round, so there's nothing to interrupt their magnetic fields, but planes have wings, things sticking out, and they can get wrenched apart. In fact, when he had his first contact, he inadvertently put his hand under the rim, and his arm was almost ripped off. The spaceman quickly pulled it to safety.
But you have to change your position because the sun...
These legends, biblical legends, turn out to be absolutely true. Now, if you read first chapter of Genesis correctly and go to the Hebrew word for day, which means a great eon, it absolutely ties up with modern theories of creation and evolution. You know, God said, let there be light. Okay, the Big Bang, suddenly there was the light, space filled with light, and then the order of creation is exactly the same as the order of evolution, starting in the sea and then gradually working out into the land. It's just told in a more poetic, oriental fashion. So the fight between the fundamentalists and the Darwinists was just damn stupid. Neither of them knew their facts.
What, tell us about the mountain here.
Well, the mountain you've just seen, that mountain, the Bao, which looks just like the one in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the local people say there's a space base under it that goes for 20 miles to Monton. And I know some locals who saw 2 big UFOs hovering over that mountain one night, and then they just darted. Whoosh. Yes, so
Go on, you can keep talking.
they just darted whoosh, into the bottom of the bow. Well, oddly enough, there's a thing that looks like a door where rock has sliced off from natural wear and tear. But a lot of UFOs are seen up in these mountains.
Why did you choose to live here?
Hmm?
Why did you choose to live here? Here in particular?
I didn't. It's my wife's house, and when I made Castle Leslie over to the children, it seemed a good place to move to us.
Okay. Nothing to do with that?
Oh, no. No, I've got a number of ailments which need living in a good climate, that's all.
Okay. Just one last question, and it's to do with what this might be about. It's something Jim Flora certainly has a thing about, is the idea of the message getting into the world. It's not getting into the world, and would you like that it gets into the world, and in what manner, or to what end, or what good will it be?
Yeah, well, I mean, from time to time, papers come out with eminent people, generals, air marshals, saying, yes, UFOs are real, And you know why we're behaving so sillily. There's an awful lot of what I call the giraffe syndrome. You know, the story of the Scotsman who saw a giraffe in the zoo. And he said, there's no such animal. There is some people who just can't bear the thought that we're not the most intelligent creature in space. Mm-hmm. We're probably one of the least intelligent. Mm-hmm. Otherwise we wouldn't be here, because this is a quarantine planet, as far as I can make out, as well as an experimental laboratory. And
who do you think might know these things? Like, imagine the royal family who must have good old think tanks behind them. Are they just interested out of kind of as a hobby, or as a kind of a, you know...
Well, just as a very interesting thing. Mm. I mean, we sent them my book, and they've been getting information from us ever since. And so have a lot of people.
Like, is there, for example, one US president more than another who is aware of it or is keen to bring it out, or are they all equally?
Well, look at the president, what was his name, Gary of Colombia. Where was that chap who announced the somebody, Gary, wasn't it? Who was president of one of these little republics. And he announced that UFOs were real, and he put out stamps. Well, the CIA took care of him soon enough. You see, poor...
Tell us the Jimmy Carter story.
Well, Jimmy Carter, before he saw them, and he said, when I'm president, I'm going to tell the truth about this. Well, he was elected, and they took him aside and said, Mr. President, would you like to see these films? And they showed him about 2 hours of films and photos, and things said, now, do you really want to go ahead and tell them all that? It would cause such a panic and such a disturbance. Anyway, they persuaded him not to.
Great.
Gorbachev, from being bitter enemies, suddenly became kissing buddies, because the UFOs did what we'd always hoped they'd do, pretend to mount an invasion. Hence Star Wars, which is ridiculous because they're here anyway. There's millions of them living here. And it shook America and Russia. And Reagan gave Star Wars to Russia. Well, if it was aimed against Russia, you don't give them your secrets. And at Geneva, that secret talk on the lake, I think, was rather about that. And it brought... well, it ended the Cold War. I don't know why these idiots are now trying to stir up Star Wars again, probably just to make money.
Yeah.
Do you think the arms industry is one of the biggest in the world? In the Middle Ages, we spent half our wealth on cathedrals, which are little there, beautiful. Today, it's on these hideous armaments. It's nasty, really. And anyone who... When Kennedy said, if I'm re-elected, I'm going to stop the war in Vietnam and tell the truth about the UFOs. He signed his death warrant when he said that.
Can I ask you a personal question? Where do you imagine you will go to when you die?
Well, I don't go anywhere. I mean, one is in the great universal here, like a butterfly popping out of a flower popping out of a pot. I'll be out of this body in my astral, a much more amenable body, because you can just travel at will. And there's so many other problems too, you see, about time jumps. Corso observed one. He said a lovely bell-like blue one came down in the desert in the Roswell area when he was there, and he went out in his jeep to examine it. And he got out, he got out very sort of gingerly. And there was this lovely object, sort of dark blue glass. And he put his hand on it, and he said it was ice cold. And as he touched it, it vanished. Reappeared half a mile away. It had done a tiny jump.
Where's Adamski from?
Well, I let me finish the story.
Oh, sorry, okay.
I said, what did you do, Colonel? He said, I got back in my Jeep and drove away like hell. I said, I bet you did. And then he went into a cave where he did actually meet a space being, a very highly evolved one, and his second book was going to be about that, if he'd lived, dear man.
How did he die?
Heart failure. He was quite old, but I think he was helped because he just issued, against his better judgment, his lawyer pressured him into serving a subpoena on the United States government to reveal the truth. And that is a very dangerous thing to do. So it wouldn't have been difficult to get rid of him.
So say that again?
What?
The lawyer wanted to do what?
His lawyer,
Yeah.
the ambitious person, wanted Corso to subpoena the American government to release the truth on the UFOs.
Yeah.
And Corso didn't want to, but the lawyer pushed him into it. And after then,
For the
Corso...
sake of sensation, or for...
No, to get it,
to get it out. Yeah, yeah.
And the last time I saw him, he was a dying man. Poor old thing.
So the pressure wasn't...
I mean, you don't, it's a bit, well, you don't, I mean, these big boys, they can do what they like.
Right.
We live in a secret fascist society. It's all underground, but, you know, you can do so far, but if you're going to upset rock the boat, it's all
And
too
I suppose
easy.
the more we seem to be liberated, the more the fascism triumphs, in a sense.
Well, the more the bullshit paperwork butts up.
Yeah.
The whole scheme is good, you know. They put on huge shows in the 50s, which were poo-pooed and people laughed, ridiculed. But now, you know, that people are taking it seriously, and there'll be more shows. And I think there will be some big landings. I don't know if I'll still be alive, but I think these things have to be done very gradually, as he said, so as not to upset our planet. And Reagan, who knew, used to cause panics, because he'd sometimes in a speech say, suppose we were invaded by people from outer space in a speech, and the FBI, my God, I know what he's going to say, he's not going to tell. Oh, thank God, we thought he was going to spare.
And do presidents and such like, because they come up out of nowhere most of the time, do they have to be corralled into what they'll say and not say?
Oh, they're pretty thoroughly briefed.
Yeah.
Well, the big ones are.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't know whether Mr. Blair's been briefed.
yeah.
Anything except politically correct nappies or
Right.
fox
And
signals.
who's doing that kind of briefing? I mean, that's an overmind is controlling that. You know, who is it? A group or is it a?
Well, it's very confused. It's largely CIA, and then there's all these national security. There's so many agencies that, of course, I said that's how he was able to keep all the stuff secret. There were so many secret agencies falling over themselves
Yeah.
that he kept all the stuff in his office drawer, and nobody remembered where it was.
Yeah. But again, coming back to
You did ask me where Adamski came from.
Yes.
Polish immigrant.
So he's more Pole or he's more American?
Well, he was very American, a wonderful sense of humor. And he had, like most contactees, he'd hear a voice say, go outside, but you know where Jim Flora gets into, and there they'd be.
Can I just get a bit of, you're getting very in the dark there for a second.
You want me to?
Hang on, yeah, go for it.
See, to sum it up, the fall of man, whatever it was, obviously this new species got a bit out of hand, and as it says in the Bible, the Elohim say if he eats the tree of life, he'll become like us. So they had to sort of downgrade us. And then this became, I think, a sort of quarantine planet, both keep us in order, which nobody's ever succeeded in doing, and also laboratory. I mean, look at the billions of species that are here, especially the insect world. A wonderful planet. It's probably one of the most exciting in the universe, one most beautiful, this wonderful blue orb with its clouds. So it's a very, very precious planet. And I don't think they're going to let us destroy it. I hope not. And when the time's ripe, we'll be let out of quarantine, and I think it'll be a young generation who will be ready for it, saying, hooray, school's over, can we come out and play now?
Did you hear that?
Well, you see, they take it for granted, those kids. That's what's so marvelous.
Okay.
I think that's it. I think we're about, the next few years, to see something very exciting. I can't give you a time date. But certainly to see Reagan and Gorbachev and the Pope all embracing and being friends, and Gorbachev apologizing to the Pope for trying to assassinate him. I mean, who would have believed that, 10 years before? There have been wonderful changes, very much prompted by the well-meaning benevolence of these people.
Just one last thing. And was the conflict that has existed prior to that a result of their influence? Like if it was fascism, communism, if it was Islam, Christianity, whatever or is that just our own free will battling around? Too big.
Well, they say if you've 2 Englishmen, you've got a club. If you've 2 Irishmen, you have a splinter group. If you have a group of people, you'll have a battles of politics all of it, until we go back to the old Vedic teachings that we're all part of the same being. See, Adamski used to teach us. He said, we've just forgotten. And I think all these New Age groups are trying to bring this memory back. Hope so.
Without being persecuted.
Nobody knew anyway. To us it seems absolutely balmy. To them it meant, well, like, not like you're a goddamn commie or a goddamn fascist. We work ourselves up into unnecessary lavas about nothing. And I'm not sure some of the baddies don't stir us up too. That's another subject.
What are you showing us there?
Well, now, these were given me by Carlos Diaz, Mexican photographer. He and his wife got this wonderful picture from their car. Probably the best ever taken. They were using a Hasselblad camera, and it's just like biblical, the chariots of fire. Remember, Elijah was taken up to heaven in a chariot of fire. What a good description. Well, there he got it just in front of the car. Then it came down and landed on the road in front. You see, this is the car's dashboard, and you get the size by the trees at each side. And this UFO, I suppose about 50 feet across, you now get the size of it.
Where was this?
Not far from Mexico City, where he lived. And he was at the conference. And then they were invited aboard, and there were very highly evolved beings in it. And he got a lot more shots. Some of it behind trees. I like those because it shows it's not a model. And
can you just lower it a little bit? Yeah, thanks.
I mean, fiery chariot, there you are.
Is this the one where the Greys and the Tibetan Lama were on?
No, that's another one, which I don't have pictures of, only drawings. Okay. But this is a marvelous photo because it shows exactly the size and scale. You see the dashboard of the car taken through the windscreen. This.
I was just going to ask you one question that has been fascinating me, is that so many people see this thing. Somebody said, it was you said 40% of people see
those are the figures given.
But they don't seem to have a lasting impact on people, even the most stupendous kind of...
No, but at least if they land or come, they'll say, oh yes, there's a UFO.
Mm-hmm.
The other one, perhaps, I don't know if they... This drawing.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that,
Archimedes. Where's Archimedes?
well, this was taken by an amateur astronomer, Fred Strickling,
Down because
who
we can't
has
see your
some...
mouth.
I think
We can't see you talking. We need to see you talking because otherwise we could be inventing what you're saying.
Yes, he had a 12 and a half. He had a 12.5-inch reflector telescope.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite powerful, and he was observing the moon one night, and he took this picture of this crater, the crater Archimedes, and there were these three great black sausage-like objects in it. Well, we know the size of the crater Archimedes, so he was able to calculate the size of these things. And they were 35 miles long and 5 miles wide. And the next day he looked and they'd gone.
And it is often seen, cigar shapes.
On the moon, yes, in my book I've got a whole chapter on UFOs on the moon. And I ask Colonel Corso, I said, we had Project Horizon for building moon bases. Why did we suddenly pack it in? And he grinned. He said, why do you think? I said, we were warned off, weren't we? He said, yes. Same with Mars.
Warned off because?
We're too belligerent. We want it for, we might start it using as a war base. They don't want us. Not yet. In fact, he told me, the most frightening thing, the Russians tried to launch 2 probes onto Phobos, the little moon of Mars, and each time it was shot down. And in the last frames transmitted, it shows a projectile coming up to it. And he said, do you know those Russians wanted to drop an atom bomb on it? I said, my God, he said, I'd say to Americans, said, for God's sake,